Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Era with Brian Gregory on this fine Sunday evening. We're live from Fort Worth, Texas. This is going to be a really fun show today. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge all of the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day, including my own Eric Gregory, my grandfather, the legendary Ron Turcotte. Happy Father's Day to y'all, and from the bottom of my heart, I deeply appreciate everything that you do. But we've got a really fun, jam-packed show tonight. And, I know that there's been a lot going on, in the world of news recently. And so I just want y'all to know that this is the place, like, regardless of what's going on in the world, this is always going to be the safe haven where you can have fun and talk about college football, NFL, and college basketball. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. And that is the Air with Brian Gregory. Today, we're going to talk about some college football rivalries that, quite frankly, we need back. They've been gone for too long. They're either not played on a yearly basis or they've just been completely scrapped, and we don't know when the next game is going to be. But I've got 5 of those, not including, there's an honorable mention on top of those. And then on top of that, we'll be talking about the situation in Cincinnati, Ohio with Shemar Stewart and the contract negotiations that are going on between him and the Bengals right now, his holdout. We're going to talk about that as well. But like I said, this is going to be a lot of fun. I enjoy talking about rivalries. I enjoy talking about the excitement associated with college football. And so we got 5 rivalries that we need back. And without further ado, here we go. Number 5, it may be a little biased, and I apologize in advance if you perceive it that way. But we need Alabama and Ole Miss to be played on a yearly basis. I've been blessed to be a part of this rivalry 3 times when I was in college, twice in Tuscaloosa, once in Oxford, and it's truly special. And I know that for a lot of yous that weren't ever in like that southern atmosphere, a lot of yous that don't have experience in that, you may not understand the magnitude of what that rivalry is. But in the South, everything is all about the border state. Alabama, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina. The list goes on and on and on. Geography and borders, they matter in the South. And take that shit seriously. We're playing our border state. And so to win that, you get bragging rights. You get to hold that over Ole Miss for a year if we, the Tide, are able to win that. But unfortunately, we're not getting that every year. Now, obviously, we're both in the SEC, so we're going to play each other at some point. If I'm speaking correctly, I believe we play again in 2026, but it's too long. It used to be an annual matchup between Alabama and Ole Miss, and ever since the SEC got restructured, and unless a team is in that big 3 of teams that you play every year, and in the case of Alabama, it's LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. Outside of that, you may not see a team for 2 or 3 years that you used to play every year because you've got that 9+3+3 format now. And so it's very different. All those yearly rivalries you used to have are now gone because we also don't have divisions in the SEC anymore. That was part of the realignment that took place with adding Texas and Oklahoma. Love having them in the conference, but it shook up a couple things. And now, unfortunately, we're not playing Ole Miss every year. But when we would play Ole Miss, it would be such a fun time. They're great fans to be around. I don't think there's 2 fan bases out there that are more hospitable than Alabama and Ole Miss. And I don't know if there's 2 fan bases that know how to drink better than Alabama and Ole Miss. And so when we get together, The cocktails are flowing, the yellow hammers are flowing, the beers are flowing, the hottie toddies are flowing. The zins are being packed, the chews being loaded in. Like it's a fun day. But we don't get it every year now. We've also had some electric matchups. Remember, Ole Miss beat Alabama 2 times in a row in the mid-20 teens, the Bo Wallace year and then the Chad Kelly year. And 2 of the past 3 matchups before, we haven't seen them in the past year, those games are pretty good. The one in Oxford in 2022, the one in Tuscaloosa in 2023. Those are 2 very good games. There's usually a great matchup. Sometimes Alabama would blow Ole Miss out. Sometimes Ole Miss would get Alabama, but it was usually a really good matchup. And so I hate the fact that that one's not an annual matchup anymore. But Alabama, Ole Miss at number 5. I know it's one that a lot of people would think of, but it's one that I definitely got on my list. Number 4. This one's a historic one. Florida and Miami. These 2, they need to play every year. The hatred between Florida and Miami is something that cannot be understated. And it's one that we often forget about because, we often think of Miami, Florida State, or Miami and Notre Dame. We usually forget about Florida and Miami. But another, geography lesson in the South here. Every team in Florida, they all hate each other. Florida, Florida State, bitter rivalry. Florida State, Miami, bitter rivalry. And Miami and Florida. We saw the game get played last year in Gainesville. It was a blowout. Miami went belt to ass on Florida. And this year, it'll be played in Coral Gables. But after this year, there's no concrete set date for the future. And that's got to change because Florida and Miami is a great, very historic rivalry. And like I said, inside the Sunshine State, these teams hate each other. There's a lot of history between Florida and Miami. Now, this is one that used to get played a lot in the old days. And they're 2 programs, kind of like Alabama and Ole Miss, that are in a pretty good time right now. I think that Florida's trajectory is really good right now. I know that some people may push back on that, but I think that Florida's actually on the uprise right now. And Miami's been like Miami, a lot of us warned you last year, but some people were taken by surprise when Miami was really good. Granted, they just missed the playoffs, but they were in contention for a while last year. Cam Ward, Xavier, Strepo. It's a great team. I think Florida's on the uprise. Alabama and Ole Miss are 2 really good programs. They need to play each other. But at number 4, I've got Florida and Miami. That rivalry needs to be played on a yearly basis. Like I prefaced, some of these still exist, but they're not played on a yearly basis. These are rivalries that need to be played every year. Number 3, this one's electric. I love this rivalry. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Bedlam. We need Bedlam every year. The hatred that exists between these 2 is unreal. You want to talk what lives on Oklahoma State fans, students, alumni's minds 24/7. The thought of beating the Oklahoma Sooners. And there were a lot of times where Oklahoma State fell short and they felt like the little brother. And now, when I grew up, I viewed Oklahoma as the gold standard, especially in the Big 12. Like, this was a team that was just dominant year in and year out. But there were some times when Oklahoma State, they got theirs. 2021, 2014, Tyreek Hill game. It's fantastic. But the one that sticks in my mind when I was growing up that I enjoyed the most between these 2 is 2017. The names in that game: Baker Mayfield, Mark Andrews, CeeDee Lamb, Mason Rudolph, James Washington. It was electric. And it was one of those, mid-2010s Big 12 games where the scoreboard just got ran up. It was so entertaining, electrifying. I think both teams, their style's a little bit different now. Granted, the system's the same at Oklahoma State. You still have Mike Gundy as your head coach. But Oklahoma's a bit different than they were in the 2010s under the leadership of Brett Venables. They're more physical on defense. They're more stingy on defense. They're not as high flying on offense, but the offenses can still be effective, with the exception of last year. 2023 looked pretty good. I think this year with John Mateer could be pretty good as well. But I would like to see these two play every year because I think it's still a pretty even matchup. You never know when Oklahoma State's just going to come out of nowhere and have a great year. They're one of the most unpredictable teams in college football. And Oklahoma, they've been hard to get a pulse on with Brett Venables as their head coach. 1 year you start 6-7. Following year you come back like a bat out of hell, and they're in playoff contention late in the year. And then the year after that, they're falling off. You get the Bama win, but outside of that, very disappointing season last year. But I could see Oklahoma bouncing back this year. I could see Oklahoma State coming out of nowhere and having a good year this year after they absolutely sucked last year. Point is, I could see this still being a very even matchup. And so with the history that exists between these two schools and just the bitter hatred that exists between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, this is one that I grew up on that, I circle my calendar for Bedlam every year. Just like Bama and Ole Miss. Got to watch it. Bedlam every year. I was glued to my television screen. From a dire college football fan, please bring this rivalry back. Number 2, this one was one of my absolute favorites growing up. And the fact that we haven't seen it as many years as we have pains me deeply. Notre Dame and Michigan. Man, how many electric matchups did you watch between these two? That Denard Robinson, Tommy Rees game. That one still plays over my head over and over and over and over again. So many ranked-on-ranked matchups between these two. And just the programs themselves. They're two of the premier programs in the North. They're not only prestigious programs with a lot of history, they're very decorated programs. They're two great institutions as well. Now, if you're a student, you get into Notre Dame or Michigan, it's an honor. These are two fan bases that have a lot of pride, and they have a lot of respect for each other. And I think that you've got to take that into account when it comes to a rivalry as well, the respect you have for each other. It was shown between Notre Dame and Michigan every year. But I just remember watching every year on NBC. Like, it was just electric. It was electrifying. And it seemed like every game, it's kind of like Steelers-Ravens when it comes to the score. Like every game's like that 24-20, 27-24, just great football being played. And so if there's anything that I wish, it is to bring back that Notre Dame and Michigan rivalry. I miss it so. But there's one right here that sticks out. Shocker, it's the thumbnail. This is by far the most historic rivalry in college football, in college sports. Kansas and Missouri. This thing dates back to the Civil War. There is legit beef between these two schools because Kansas was a Union state and the Confederacy was fighting for Missouri. It dates all the way back to the 1860s. And so the hatred that these two states have for each other dating back to then fuels this rivalry. And we saw it come to a peak in 2007, of course, when it was number 2 against number 4 at Arrowhead. The craziest year of college football ever. Of course, Missouri won that game, went on to play Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship where they lost. Kansas ended the season strong, beating Virginia Tech, and Missouri finished the season strong in the Cotton Bowl, beating Arkansas. But I'm a big history buff, and I think that history is a major component of college football. It needs to be embraced. And if the league is going to show that it appreciates that element of history by any means, you bring this rivalry back. I know Kansas is in the Big 12, Missouri's in the SEC. Make space for these two to play, and I want them to play on Thanksgiving weekend, just like they did every year, just like they did in 2007 in Arrowhead Stadium, and I want to be in Arrowhead Stadium. There's not many games, there's not many rivalries where I request it to be in a neutral site. In fact, there's only two. The Cotton Bowl for Texas and Oklahoma, and for this game to be played in Arrowhead Stadium. It needs to be. This has got to come back. Like I said, this all trickles back to the changes that we faced in college football when it comes to conference realignment. A lot of the reason why these teams don't play each other anymore is because they're in different conferences now, or divisions have been eliminated. The SEC East, SEC West being eliminated. That's why Alabama and Ole Miss don't play each other. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State don't play each other because they're not in the Big 12 together anymore. Notre Dame and Michigan just wasn't renewed. It's unfortunate. It sucks. Kansas and Missouri, they're not in the Big 12 anymore. When Missouri went to the SEC back in 2012, excuse me, that's when we lost it. It's a sad case, but I think I speak for a lot of college football fans when I say I don't really give a shit what conference these teams are in or if they're independent. They need to play each other every year for the spirit and the pageantry of our sport. These rivalries, these 5 rivalries, need to come back because they're at the very epicenter of what makes college football what it is. I said there was going to be an honorable mention, and here it is. TCU and Boise State. I'm saying that right here from Fort Worth. TCU's right down the street. I want to see the Broncos come here every other year. And that's the thing with these rivalries, too. They'll be played every year and, rotating where the location is. It's at one team's place one year and at the other team's home the following. TCU and Boise State, they got to play every year. When these two were in the Mountain West together, it was electric. Those games in the late 2000s were amazing when both TCU and Boise State were on the uprise. And then both of them seemed to find themselves in the top 10 at the end of every year. That rivalry was incredible. And I think that Boise State and TCU would be a very even matchup now. Boise State's been on a very good trajectory. We've had some fantastic players go through the past several years. And with TCU's level of depth and level of talent, I think that the matchup with them and Boise State would be great. And plus the matchup, the relationship the fan bases have with each other, TCU and Boise State would be a fun time. Let's bring that magic back into college football. So there they are. Alabama and Ole Miss, Florida and Miami, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Notre Dame and Michigan, and Kansas and Missouri. These are the 5 rivalries that college football needs back. And of course, there's some that I forgot. If there are, please let me know in the comment section below. But that wraps up the rivalries that we need back in college football. All right, let's shift gears here and let's talk about this Shemar Stewart situation that's going on up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so as we know, Shemar Stewart was the Bengals' first-round pick this year. And he's currently holding out amidst a contract dispute with the Bengals. And so I'm not going to lie. When I initially saw this story get unveiled, my thought process was, you got to be shitting me. You're a rookie, dude. Get to minicamp, get to practice, prove yourself. You haven't played a snap yet. You are not in any position to be holding out, sitting out of practice because of contract negotiations. It was giving me flashbacks of the Nico Iamaleava situation. I'm like, we don't need this in the NFL now with rookies. This is terrible. But then, he leaves the Bengals minicamp, and this is an interesting situation. I saw it pop up on Bleacher Report the other day. I was like, you know what? I'm going to click this and read this a little bit. And when you start to dig below the surface of this story, it's quite fascinating. And quite frankly, my opinion shifted. It changed. Now I kind of side with Shemar Stewart in a situation with the Bengals. He's holding out because of the language that's in this rookie contract with the Bengals. And it's honestly quite concerning. If I were in Shemar Stewart's situation, I'd probably be sitting out as well. And I'm not a fan of holdouts because of contract negotiations. But if I were him or if I were his agent, I would be urging him to do the same thing. This language, this phrasing that the Bengals included in Shemar Stewart's rookie contract is that they want to include a default that would trigger another default in future years that could potentially void some of Shemar Stewart's guaranteed money. And if I'm his agent, I'm his parents, I'm his support system, I'm Shemar himself, and I'm reading this, I'm concerned. I'm not signing this thing. I'm not going to practice. I'm not suiting up because you can tell that the Bengals are strategizing and structuring this contract so that they can get out of paying him in the future. And he may lose out on money that was promised to him. That is a very viable reason to sit out because of contract negotiations. So Ben Baby, who does a fantastic job for ESPN breaking down the Bengals, probably one of the best team reporters that ESPN has, love Ben Baby's work. He went into some depth about the situation and that language that's in the contract. And so one component of it is that if Shemar Stewart is suspended for any reason, it could be off-field stuff. It could be stuff that happens on the field, like leaning with the crown of his helmet, getting ejected. That in itself could eliminate guarantees in his contract, which is insane. There's also another component of this contract that says that the Bengals are. Oh, hold on here. I'm having issues reading my handwriting here. My bad. I messed that up. Shemar Stewart says that the Bengals are more concerned about winning arguments than they are like actually structuring contracts the right way. And if I'm Shemar Stewart, that really concerns me. And I'm just looking at the Bengals here. They got to get this together because we're seeing the same thing happen with the Trey Hendrickson situation. They're not getting anywhere close to these guys. They're not meeting these guys where they are. Like Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals are now talking again, which is great. But they still seem very far apart. The Bengals, like they're just not seeming to budge with this whole situation with Shemar Stewart or Trey Hendrickson. And what's concerning is that both of these disputes are on the defensive side of the ball, the side of the ball that the Bengals need the most help with. And so they've got to figure it out. They've been trying to dance around the Trey Hendrickson thing for a while. They said to him last year, when Trey Hendrickson threatens requesting a trade and driving himself out of Cincinnati, the Bengals said, pump the brakes. You produce this year, we'll hook you up with a contract extension next year. Well, now they're dragging their feet again. And now they're including this language in Shemar Stewart's contract. It's quite concerning. It's quite concerning. And hearing that Shemar Stewart says that the Bengals are more concerned with being right than they are like finding middle grounds, it's concerning as well. And I feel for Bengals fans, and I love the Bengals organization. I want to see them succeed. But I made a sure about the Trey Hendrickson thing a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to stick to my guns here. They got to figure out how to meet these players where they are and get these contracts squared away, see eye to eye with Trey Hendrickson, see eye to eye with Shemar Stewart, because they need help on the interior. They need help in their secondary as well. But success starts in the trenches. We all know that. And the Bengals have got to get this figured out. Now, granted, this language is this type of language is also included in the Seahawks and the Cardinals rookie contracts for the people that they draft in the first rounds. But I'm just talking about the Bengals here. And the fact that it's included in Shemar Stewart's contracts and they're having the dispute that they're having right now, it's got to get figured out. There's got to be a solution here soon. I was on the Bengals side at first. I was like, why the hell is this guy sitting out? But now that I look at it more, I see where Shemar Stewart is coming from. And the Bengals have got to make some adjustments here when it comes to how they navigate these contracts and these negotiations and keeping guys happy, satisfied, retains within the team. That's all I got to say about that. was a shorter show today. It's Father's Day, so I'm going to let everybody get back to their festivities. But I want to thank everyone who hopped on today for joining and watching what I had to say about these rivalries that need to come back to college football and the Shemar Stewart situation. It's quite interesting stuff. It's really interesting, and I can't wait to watch the Shemar Stewart situation continue to break down. But we got to see these rivalries come back to college football at some point. If y'all supporters of the show, please bang on the table for the NCAA for me as well to bring these back. We're going to have a show next weekend as well. May have Zeke Wager on. I'm going to try to convince him to come on next weekend to talk some NFL stuff. I think we'll have Luke Close come on this Wednesday, but I'm going to New York the following week. So that schedule will be kind of staggered. But we got some interviews coming. We got some long form coming, some short form stuff coming. Just trying to keep y'all entertained through the summer season. I know they can be the dog days of summer when it comes to football and college basketball. There's not much to talk about. But I promise we're going to continue to lean into college football and NFL and even college basketball throughout the summer here. And before we know it, the fall will be back. But all y'all that came on tonight, you're real ones. I tip my cap to you. You're true college football and NFL loyalists. And I really appreciate that. Let me know what y'all think about all of this in the comment section below. From Fort Worth, this is Brian Gregoire signing off. Have a great day.